Hello all, welcome to another endgame study of the Solving Hard Studies to Improve Chess Calculation series. This is a special one because it comes from David Bronstein. He was a really top contender for the World Championship title, a strong player, very strong player. He played against Botvinnik and they drew 12-12 and Botvinnik just retained the title because there was a rule at that time that the world champion retains the title if it draws. There were no bullet tie breaks at that time, which is a shame for our days, of course. But at that time, the rules say, okay, the world champion just needs to draw the match. And besides that, he was also a writer. In fact, I am going to show you here the book I am reading about the Zurich tournament. And I think it's one of the best books covering a tournament. We can learn not only about the games but about the environments of those times. So it's an historical book in my perspective. So here we are with this study, with this end game study for us. For the practice, I suggest you watch the guide so you can extract the best from the time invested. And then the countdown, the 10 minute, the main one will start. And after that, I'll catch you up to start the guided solution. And here we are, and this position deserves for us to start with the best move, the brilliant one. We just sacrifice one of our pawns. What? We need them. We need them. So at the first, when we analyze the position, we see, okay, we just have a bishop and 2 pawns, so we need to keep f5 pawn, otherwise it's impossible to win. On the other side, black will try to control also the promotion of the h pawn, which forces our bishop to go to the long diagonal to cover that. And so we see that the core idea on the position, on dynamic of the position, is the balance between keeping the f5 pawn protected and avoiding that black is able to promote its own h pawn. Of course, here f4 pawn, it's lost. So maybe it's a surprise, maybe it's not a surprise. I, in fact, had the idea of going with f6. I had that idea, and the idea is simple. We advance the pawn, and at first we look like, okay, shouldn't we protect it? And then when black takes with Gen, move our own other pawn to f5, and so we keep 1 pawn, but we need to sacrifice the other one. Okay, let's go back to the first position, because let's see the forced continuation of check. Well, this is just them, because black just takes the f pawn directly, the f5 pawn. Even if white wins 2 pawns in the end, we just get a bishop, and bishop alone can't checkmate the black king, of course. So this is just losing time from here on. And the other option, a very important one, is to go with the king to go after black pawns. And so as our f pawn is at the moment protected, let's go with that. Of course, black here takes f4 pawn, there's no doubts about it. So we grab f7 pawn, and of course this is not working for white, but at the moment we don't know, and black advances the h4 pawn. Here black, okay, has the possibility to go after the pawn, but this doesn't work, because just the run for the promotion won't work, because black will be in time also to promote to a queen. And of course from here, well, let's say the king goes to e3, well, this is just a draw in the game. So white tries a better plan, which is to, okay, let's keep protecting our pawn and then move around so we can control the promotion of the h pawn. Of course, here black goes with the pawn, advances the pawn. We need to go to the long diagonal, so let's prepare the bishop for that, because the e4 pawn at the moment is controlled by the enemy king. The pawn advances again, so we go to the long diagonal, and of course now it's simple to see that if black wants to save this one, needs to keep the king connected with the white pawn. So grabbing the idea of, if white king goes after our pawn, we grab white pawn, and it's game over for the win chances of white. Of course, over here, another thing that may happen is we can't advance the black pawn, because otherwise white just remains with the pawn advancing its own and not exchanging, of course. So it's black to play over here, and because black has few options, it goes with king g5. There are more over here that draw, but the idea is black needs to stay connected with the f5 pawn. So the king stays also connected. It's black to play again, so needs to go to g4, so keeping connection with the white pawn. Of course, now the bishop can maneuver to win 1 tempo over black. So let's move the bishop, blocking the pawn. So the king needs to come back, and when it comes back, we play bishop f3, and so we have reduced the scope from black to play connected to the pawn. So one thing is for sure, black king can't move on and stay connected. On the other side, there's a pawn to promote to release the bishop. Maybe that's an idea, maybe it's not an idea. On the other side, it's also possible to calculate what if we advance g6 pawn, but let's let you find it. So it's the first pause, it's another countdown, 1 minute this time. Pause if you need more, and then I catch you up to go on with black to play and to draw from here. And let's go to see how black can draw from here. Well, basically the two options are to go with the king to h6 or h4. Very fast we see that if we advance the pawn, then white will promote the f pawn easily. And if we just sacrifice the h pawn, well, the bishop gets out, the king comes, but then we move the bishop anywhere, the king goes back, and then we get this position, but with black without the pawn. So it's game over for black. Then we are just going to need to win the g7 pawn. It's easy for white. So here, basically, the idea is the king needs to go to one of these sides, and the wrong one is to go with the king h6. Why? Because of course the king first wins the opposition. So notice that the king can't come back, so needs to go to h7, and now the king forces the enemy king to go to the h rank. The king goes to g8. Now it's white to play. Of course, we ideally we want to force black to promote the h pawn, so we win it, just wasting one temp. So the king goes to any other side. And when he goes to the other side, it's the same if it goes to f8. We just cut it from coming back. So notice that the king would be in a stalemate if there was not for the pawn. So the pawn promotes, and then I grab the queen, and the king comes back. And from here, it's very easy. We just need to work around, so we grab the g7 pawn and keep things under control. So let's go with a move like bishop e4. Now the king chooses one side. Let's go for the corner, but the other side is more or less similar. We just need to cut it. Sorry for this. Okay, what I've done here. Okay, so here, if it goes here, well, we just avoid it come back, and when it moves, then as you can see, it's very easy. So let's see it's going for the corner, which is a bit harder, not that hard, but okay, whatever. It's easier to say. So here we just use the king, so the king moves away, and notice that now we can deliver a discovered check. So the king chooses a place, and then we get a queen very soon, and this is going to be a win. So we need to calculate this, but I think going to h6, well, the idea is a bit forced, and so more or less we are able to do it. So then we have the other remaining option, which is to go the king to h4. Now, of course, it's white to play. Let's go with the main idea, the king coming to f4. So disconnecting the king from reaching the pawn. Of course, now the king comes to h3. Very natural moves. And now it's white to play. And of course, the king tries to go to reach the pawn. But here the king wins one tempo on our bishop. The bishop needs to remain on diagonal. Let's go to c6. Uh, and the king needs to work it out from here. Of course, we can't sacrifice as black the pawn, so we need to come back to h3. And when the king reaches to the threat of grabbing our pawn, don't forget we are seeing from black perspective at the moment, then the king just needs to connect again against the pawn. So it's white to play again. What can you do? Let's say it moves the bishop again. We need to stay connected to the pawn, don't forget that. And because the bishop can't come and cut us again, we are threatening to promote. We get a draw. There are no more ways for white to force it from here. As you can see, we can stay here forever, and the bishop moving on the diagonal forever, and it will be just a draw. Okay, let's go back to the start, and we already saw, okay, this line didn't work, although we also needed to play it precisely and find the best moves for black. But it's white to play, and as we saw, white sacrificed the pawn. Of course, over here, it's not a good idea to avoid the exchange, because the king will be very fast grabbing the f7 pawn and then promoting the more advanced pawn, so black needs to accept it. Of course, now we need to advance the pawn. There is no other way to go with this. We need the pawn. And now it's black to play. And of course, going on with advancing the pawn is not that clever, because we are just going to control the promotion, of course, when the time arrives. And as you can see, black has no tempo over here to win this one. It's going to be different. Now we are going to be able to place the pawn on f6. Now the king stays connected to the pawn, so ideally we need to place our king on e7. Of course, we now can't get away from the pawn, but let's use the bishop. let's move on with the bishop one time. When the king comes back, the bishop comes to e4. So now we are cutting the king from that connection. And when the king moves, now our king can maneuver to reach that desired position. And of course, black can't do nothing over here. It's going to lose the pawn and the game. So going on with advancing the pawn, it's not happening for black. So black plays king f4, and it's white to move from here. Of course, the only way to progress is for the king to go after the pawn. So let's play king e7. So now it's black to play, and the best idea is to protect the f6 pawn, so forcing the king not to grab in the different way, so forcing the king to grab the f7 pawn. Black here, of course, will advance the h pawn. Now it's white to play. Let's protect the f5 pawn. Why? Because we need to release our bishop to control the promotion of the pawn, of course. Let's play king g6. Now it's black to play, again advancing the pawn, and it's the moment we need to think a bit about the position. It's white to play. What is the correct move that white needs to play from here? And okay, there are more than one move, but the correct move is to go with bishop d1. Of course, the other idea of going with the bishop a4 also works, because after the king moves to d5, notice that the king is controlling the maneuver of the bishop to occupy the long diagonal. Well, the bishop can come back, and the king again controls the entrance with f3, and we get the same position that in the main line. So in the main line, the correct move is to go directly to bishop d1, and we get the king to go to e4, so with the idea of restricting the bishop to go to f3, and then, of course, advancing the pawn freely to promote to a queen. So another minute for you, another pause if you need, and then I get you back to go until the end of this solution, find how white can go on from here and force the win. And you need to find the maneuver to go with the bishop to the long diagonal without the king being able to stop it. So we need to find bishop e2. Of course, now it's black to play. Black can't move the king anymore, because otherwise the bishop is just going to maneuver to the other side. So it advances the pawn. And of course, now white needs to go to the longest square available, that it's a6. it doesn't work to go to b5. Would be a very basic blunder because the king then just moves and there are no way on next move the threat is to promote, so the bishop needs to go again to h6, but then again the king avoids the entrance of the bishop, and of course the bishop coming back is not working because there will be a queen on next move. And so without much effort, I think we go to the longer square, to the distant square, so we can guarantee that when black promotes, we get this skewer, the king moves, we get the queen and the game, of course. Next, we're just going to need to grab the pawn, and from that, it's just an easy win for white. Hope you have enjoyed. This was a really interesting one from a very famous player of our past, and hope you have enjoyed. As always, I hope to catch you in future videos. So bye bye and keep shaking.